Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Cooking Seafood. My name is Charles. I get to have the privilege of being your host for today. I hope you are all doing well. You've had a fantastic week so far. And of course, I hope you also had a great Christmas. So, belated Christmas greetings to all of you here today. I hope you had some fun and a great time over the holidays, whether that was with friends, with family, or whoever you got to spend your holidays with. For those of you who are here with us live, I would like to kindly ask you to just let me know how our connection is today by saying something in our chat. So if you could maybe say hi, hello, or let me know how was your Christmas. Go ahead, type it in the chat. If you can hear me, you can see my video and the presentation as well. So far, it seems like our connection is great. That is awesome. If we are having any connection problems today during our webinar, just let me know as well. And of course, I will do my best to either assist you or fix the connection error from my side. I see that we have a bunch of people here today. Hello, that's awesome. Pleasure to see all of you. I see some familiar names. So for those of you who do already know me, it's great to see you again. I am excited to be learning with you all again. And for those of you who this is our first time meeting, as I see some new names here today, it's a pleasure to meet you. I love this opportunity where I get to spend some more time with you all. And if this is our first time together, like I said, it's a privilege to be here with you today. And I am excited to explore this interesting topic of cooking and seafood. Actually, one of my first jobs was actually being a cook. So I love cooking. I cook all the time here at home. So I am really honestly very excited for this topic. Over the next couple minutes, I am just quickly going to explain what we will be doing today so that you have an understanding, at least, of what today's topic will be about. As I do so, if you need to grab a snack, maybe a drink, a notebook, feel free to do so, as we will maybe give people, let's say, 1 or 2 more minutes to join us before we get into all of our material. So, what are we going to be talking about today? Obviously, with the title of Cooking and Seafood, our focus will be to talk about seafood. Seafood is one of those interesting delicacies around the world where you either love it, you don't like it as much, or you don't like seafood at all. It's one of those foods that polarizes a lot of people. You either are obsessed with seafood like myself, or you don't like seafood that much, and that's okay. Everyone has their own preferences, but what exactly counts as seafood? And of course, what are the different options for us? If you look at seafood, it is one type of cuisine that has a huge variety of options. If you look at, for example, if you want to eat a chicken, there's not many options, right? It's all chicken. If you want to eat a cow, I mean, you have different spices of cow, different cuts of cow, I should say, but it's all kind of very similar, at least with the taste. With seafood, it seems that every different kind of seafood you have, or maybe even different versions of the same seafood, has a lot of different flavors and different tastes. So we should know, what are the different things that we can realize, or at least from sight, what can we know are the different options? And of course, since our topic is also talking about seafood, we are going to go ahead and spend some time talking about the different cooking techniques. When it comes down to seafood, I think there are so many different techniques that you should know. And when we talk about it today, we'll go over some techniques that you can use specifically for seafood, but there are also different kinds of cooking techniques that you can use for other types of food. So let's go ahead. Before we dive into our topic, let me just give you 2 last reminders. Reminder number 1, I would just to give you a quick notice of how long we will be here. If this is your first time joining us for a webinar, we go on for around 30 minutes together. We began today at around 7 p.m., so that means we will finish at around 7:30. And during our webinar, feel free, use our chat, make comments about what we learned, participate in activities that we have. And as we talk about these different kinds of foods, maybe even let me know, do you enjoy this kind of food or not? Our chat will be open for our whole webinar, so feel free to use it. Let's go ahead, dive into our topic. And before we do so, I see a few more people have just joined us in the past couple minutes. So if you just got here, awesome to see you. Let's go ahead, discuss cooking, specifically with seafood. So as we're talking about seafood, right, it's one of those things that we all know about, but specifically it can function as a kind of thing we call meat. Now, meat is simply animal flesh that is eaten as food. And like I mentioned earlier, there are lots of different animals that we get our meat from. Typically, you have your cows, you have your pigs, you have your chickens, and you have different sea creatures that you would consider to eat the meat that comes from them. But as we think of meat, it's such a broad variety, right? Any type of thing that we eat as animal flesh, right? Like in this picture, you see so many different kinds of meat. Now, typically, if you look at something that comes from pig or a cow, you can call that what we call red meat. But something on the right side here, if you look at right here on this side of the picture, we see something that is not red meat. It's actually, yes, chicken, but it actually has a name. We can refer to it as poultry. Poultry is simply domestic birds that are kept for either their meat or their flesh or to produce eggs. And there are many different types of poultry that we can get. You have your standard chicken that I think most people enjoy. You have turkey, you have quail, whatever it is. If it's a domestic bird that is used for either the meat that they have or the eggs, it is considered poultry. So yes, we have meat, we have our red meats, and we have our poultry. And of course, we have our topic for today, and that is the seafood. If we refer to seafood, it's simply any form of sea life that is thought of as a food by humans. And there are so many different kinds of seafood. I mean, if you take a look at this picture on the right side of your screen right here, that is a lot of different kinds of seafood. Like I mentioned, if we talk about poultry, there's only a few kinds of poultry. If we talk about red meat, there are only a few kinds of red meat. But seafood is such a broad cuisine. There are so many different kinds of seafood. So before we get into anything, maybe let me know in our chat, what are your opinions on seafood? Is seafood something you enjoy? Is it something you hate? Is it okay? Or maybe do you eat seafood all the time? Let me know. What is your experience with seafood? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or you don't really care that much? Me personally, I love seafood. I live in a tropical country in the Philippines, and the Philippines has a lot of seafood, and I really, really love seafood. However, like we mentioned, there are so many different kinds of seafoods, right? Some seafoods I enjoy, some seafoods not that great. Like someone said in the chat, I don't like seafood, and that's okay. But there's a lot that we can learn from this topic. Whether you enjoy seafood, you hate it, it's not your thing, whatever it is, we do have a lot of things to talk about when it comes to seafood. Like I mentioned, if you enjoy it like Joanna, you don't like it like Gabriella, or you enjoy it even like Eva, whatever it is, there's something we can all learn. So the first thing let's focus on are the two major types of seafood. Now, there are two major groups that a lot of people look at when it comes down to seafood. The first one is probably the most popular type of seafood that you will hear about, and that is your fish, right? Fish are really, really interesting. There are so many kinds of fish. Like we mentioned earlier, if we talk about the idea of seafood, it's like you can have one category of seafood, and then you have so many different kinds of that. So For example, with your fish, you have things like tuna, salmon, so many different kinds of fish. You have cod, sea bass, trout, and they all have a unique kind of taste. But like some people say in the chat, vegetarian, Alexandra, that's okay, right? Nothing wrong with that. I see a lot of people do enjoy prawns and shrimps. That's awesome. Awesome. But we all have our preferences, right? Some people might love fish. Personally, my father hates fish, but he enjoys other kinds of seafoods. My mother, she'd eat any kind of seafood. Me, I'm in the middle. I enjoy most seafoods. So your first major category of seafood would be your fish, right? And some people love fish. Some people, it tastes too salty. Some people might say it tastes like the ocean, but fish is quite enjoyable for some people. And for some people, maybe even here, like Eva said, hey, she only likes fish. That's okay. But remember, fish as a term is singular and plural. We don't need to say fishes or fish when we talk about plural, because fish is both singular and plural. You can have one fish and 10 fish, all right? So your first category of seafood is your fish. The second one actually is referred to as shellfish. Now, your shellfish are aquatic animals, so animals that live in the ocean, but what we talk about with them is that they have a shell. They are having sort of a hard exterior that protects them. And if you look at this picture on the right side of your screen, you see many different kinds of shellfish. And these are a little bit harder to eat than fish and a little harder to cook, but they are quite enjoyable. And I personally really enjoy shellfish. However, some people have an allergy to shellfish, quite interestingly enough, and they are a little bit allergic to shellfish. But what are the different kinds of shellfish? Well, let's go ahead and let's discuss the more popular kinds of shellfish. So, first type of shellfish, probably one of the most popular, is your shrimp. Pictured here on the right side of your screen, these are your shrimps. And I see a lot of people in our chat have mentioned that they really enjoy shrimp. Shrimp is actually my favorite kind of food. I absolutely love shrimp so much. But there is an interesting term to know. Somebody mentioned in the chat that they enjoy prawns. Now, there actually is a bit of a similarity with prawns and shrimp. They look very identical almost, but there is a little bit of a difference with prawns and shrimp. If you look at most ideas behind, I guess, with prawns, they are found in fresh water, while shrimp are found in salt water. Prawns are also a lot bigger, while your shrimps are kind of a little bit smaller. But a big tell with the difference with prawns and shrimps is that shrimps are a little bit circular. They are a little bit shaped like this. They have a bit of a curve, while your prawns don't have much of a curve. They're kind of straight with the difference. So that is something to note. Shrimp and prawns, similar, but they have some differences. Now, somebody else in the chat also mentioned a different kind of seafood that we'll discuss, and these are your lobsters. Lobsters, pictured here on the right side of your screen, very delicious. They are big creatures. They have big claws on their hands, and they are kind of colored orange when you cook them. Very interestingly enough, they change color and they become orange. Now, another kind of thing that's very similar to lobsters are the things we call crabs. Now, crabs, pictured here on the right side of your screen, as the others, this is what your crabs look like. Personally, I enjoy crabs. They do taste quite well, but I enjoy lobsters and shrimp a little bit more. Now, these are probably the three most common kinds of shellfish that you will hear. You're going to have your shrimps or prawns, very similar. You're going to have your lobsters and your crab. But there are a few more different kinds of shellfish to take note of. You have your things that you call your clams, pictured here on the right side of your screen. Your clams, they are in this little shell and they're completely closed. And when you cook them, you have to open it up and you get the meat on the inside. Those are your clams. And there are some things that are a little bit similar to clams, but they are all a little bit different. When we talk about your clams, they are very similar to what we call your mussels, but the difference is the shell. If you remember, let's take a look back at your clams. This is how they are having their shells. It's a little bit small, a little bit more oval. If you have your mussels, they're pictured here on the right side of your screen. They're a little bit longer and they are not as circular as your clams. Now, one thing that is often confused with clams are the things you call your scallops. And these are how they look when you're cooking them. Now, scallops and your clams have very similar shells. So the way to tell the difference is just in the details of the shell. I'm not a personal expert on the differences with scallops and scallops and clams, but when you cook them, they are completely different, 100%. Scallops are often cooked in a way that they're fried, like the picture, and clams are cooked a little bit differently. So scallops you typically eat without the shell, and some clams you eat with the shell, and Gabrielle said oysters are also very similar to these as well. Now, we talked about some very popular kinds of shellfish, but there are still a couple things to take note of with your seafoods. Another one is your squids. And like someone mentioned in the chat, calamari is made of squid. And these are your squids on the right side of your screen. Now, these are very, very popular, especially calamari, like Askia said in our chat. Very, very enjoyable, quite a delicacy. But something that gets confused with squids a lot, but is very different, are your octopus, or octopi, I should say. Your octopus is pictured on the right side of your screen. Like Gabriella mentioned, yep, there is your octopus. It is very interesting. Now, they're much more of a delicacy than squids. Squids, you kind of find them in most places, or the calamari at least. Octopus is a bit of a delicacy when you compare it to other kinds of food. It's very interesting how it's cooked. I personally don't like octopus that much. It kind of scares me how it looks. I don't think I'd be comfortable eating it, but some people say octopus is really good to have. Now, we've talked about all of these different kinds of seafoods, from your prawns, from your crabs, your shrimp, your octopus, or even your squids. Now, how can we go ahead and cook this? But somebody has a question in the chat. Is octopi plural? So yes, if we talk about the term octopi, it is the oldest plural of octopus. It's actually quite an old term. Some people say octopuses, but it's not as formal as octopi. So you can use both octopi and octopuses, but most people will probably stick to octopi, Maria. So I hope that answers your question. But let's go ahead. Let's dive into the different ways you can cook these kinds of seafoods, or simply different ways you can cook in general. The first one we'll discuss is your grilling. When you grill, you simply cook using a grill. So you grill can be an action to verb, and it's the action of cooking on a grill. But a grill is what we see on the right side of our screen right here. When we see this sort of machine that has different grates on it, if you remember earlier, we looked at the squids being cooked. Those squids were cooked on a grill. You were grilling the squids. And grilling is quite popular for seafood, especially squids, but you also grill a lot with things like crabs. Some people like to grill crabs, but other things like some poultry. People grill chicken and red meat a lot. So grilling is not only for your seafood. But other things you can cook, probably poaching is quite interesting with seafood. If you poach something, you cook it by simmering in a small amount of liquid. Like in this picture on the screen, it's an example of someone poaching some fish. So they have a liquid and it has seasoning, it has vegetables to add flavor. And so you basically slowly cook your seafood in this water, which adds a lot of flavor. The downside to poaching, it takes a long time to cook something in it, but compared to like grilling, but it is quite enjoyable because poaching adds a lot of flavor to the food that they have. But probably the most popular way people go ahead and cook their seafood is they enjoy to sear it. If you sear your food, it's simply cooked at a high temperature to brown the outside of the food. You put a little bit of oil in the pan, you put it at a high temperature, and it makes some nice sizzling sounds. And you sear the seafood, or you can sear the meat, the chicken, whatever it is. Searing, great way, very fast way to cook your food as well. Now, when we talk about cooking it, one thing some people really enjoy doing if they have an oven is they love to bake. Baking, you cook it with dry heat in an oven. So if you have an oven, you turn that baby up, add some heat, you put your food in there, and you bake it. Great way to cook, but downside, it also does take a long time. Now, Gabriela mentioned an interesting, poach also means to hunt. Yes, poach can mean to hunt certain animals illegally, but poaching is also a way to cook, or a different technique of cooking. And the last type of cooking we're going to discuss today is your frying. Frying, you cook your food in a large amount of oil. So don't get frying and searing confused, okay? Searing, you cook in a small amount of oil. If you go ahead and fry, you typically go ahead and put your whatever meat you have or food you have in a large amount of oil. And that's the main difference with those two. Okay, searing, you cook in a little oil. Frying, you put in a lot of oil. So those are all your different types of ways you can cook. You have pan searing, you have frying, grilling, baking, you even have poaching that we discussed. So I know we spent a lot of time in the past 20 or so minutes with me talking and everyone making some comments in the chat. That's awesome. Let's do some more interactive exercises. Let us practice together. So up on your screen, there's going to be an incomplete sentence, and here is that sentence. I want you to go ahead and complete the sentence with the correct option. So you have two options here, A or B, poultry or seafood. Your sentence says, turkey is an example of blank. And from what we've talked about, is turkey an example of A, poultry, or is turkey an example of B, seafood? Let me know. What do you think? Is it A or is it B? I see a bunch of answers in the chat. Awesome. Thank you guys for participating. If you went with letter A, poultry, that is the correct answer. Why? Because remember, poultry is the different types of birds that you use for their meat or the eggs. And turkey is one of those birds that we use. Now, let's go ahead. Let's try one last activity together. Number 2, blank involves cooking in a seasoned liquid. Now, we have two options, A and B again. Do we say poaching involves cooking in a seasoned liquid? Or do we say frying involves cooking in a seasoned liquid? So both of these involve going ahead and talking a lot with the idea of liquids. But which one is a seasoned liquid? Is that poaching or is that frying? All right, so if you went ahead and you said again, letter A, poaching, that is the right answer because you want to make sure that poaching is a seasoned liquid. If you go ahead and have the idea of someone that is going to fry, that's when they cook in a large amount of oil, right? Awesome job, everyone. Seems like everyone was perfect. That's great. That's great. Awesome job, everyone. And let me give you all a couple quick reminders before we do a little Q&A. Remember what we've discussed so far, the different things we eat. Red meat, poultry, seafood. 3 major categories of food that we eat. Along with that, remember the multiple kinds of seafood. We had so many examples, from your fish to your shellfish, to your squids, so many different kinds of seafood. Maybe go ahead and think which one's your favorite or which one you would like to try next. And then, of course, remember the different ways we can cook seafood. We discussed a few, and there are also some of those techniques that you can cook other types of food with. And like I just mentioned, we're going to do a quick Q&A. That is a quick question and answer. So if you guys have any questions from what we've discussed today, this is the time to ask about it. So if there's something we talked about that you would like me to go ahead and give you an answer to, or something that you would just like to ask, go ahead. Our chat is open for that now. As we wait for any questions to come in, I would absolutely love to hear what you thought about today's webinar. So there is currently a poll up on your screen that just asks the question, did you find our webinar useful? Was this an interesting topic? Did you learn something? Did you benefit from it? Was this helpful? If so, mission's accomplished. And as a little treat for everyone here, I sent a link in our chat that goes ahead and shares my personal favorite recipe when it comes to cooking shrimp, as that is my favorite kind of seafood. All right, so thank you all for filling out that poll, and we still have maybe a minute or two for any other questions. So don't be shy. If you would like to ask something, go ahead and do so. We'll go ahead, run one more poll as we wait. If there's anyone here who would like to join us in a similar event in the future, in another webinar, go ahead and click yes. We would love to see you there, and that would be awesome. Maybe we'll get to see each other again in the future. All right, so I don't see any questions, so that will be all from me today. But before I go, here's a quick reminder for all of you. Check us out on our social medias. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Check us out. We post content on there, and I encourage you to check us out. You won't regret it. That's going to be all from me. Thank you for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, I want to wish you all a happy new year as we are approaching 2022 in just a few days. Best wishes, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you all again soon. Maybe I will get to see you through another webinar in the future, or even through a lesson on the platform. Until then, take care, stay safe, everyone, and goodbye for now.